So how about we start off with Chris, you introduce yourself so they get more of a taste of who you are, and then we'll start with the questions.
Cool. And so you're going to start interviewing me first, right?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So my name's Chris Hanlon. I have been involved with coaching speakers for over 10 years. So 2014, I started as one of the founders of TEDx Ruakura, which is a local TEDx here that we started in 2014. Before that, I had been a instructional designer for a telecommunications company. So basically, that means I created training, facilitated. So I was quite comfortable to speak on stage and doing trainings and that sort of thing. And before that, from the age of 16, when I started karate, I got very much used to teaching karate. So I had my own dojo for a while. I got my black belt at 21. Um, and that meant that when I had my own dojo twice a week, I'm training a bunch of people, and you have to be very specific about the instructions you give, so somebody doesn't end up with a foot in their face or something stupid like that. So you've got to be quite direct in those sorts of terms. So when we started TEDx Ruakura, we didn't know what we were doing, like any time you start something new, and we made the mistake of getting six of us. There were six founding members and there were six speakers. Each founding member got to coach a speaker. Not a great way to do it. When we had our first get together to see what the speakers were doing, and we went around the table, they'd get up and speak and we'd go around the table. Everybody else would say, very well done. Oh, that's beautiful. Oh, that. And I was the Simon Cowell of the bunch, if that makes any sense to you. Um,
I don't
yeah, well, you
understand
could do
that.
this, you could do that. So they got me to take over TEDx Ruakura as the speaking coach then. And so over the next decade, we had some speakers were really good and some weren't so good. And my goal was to get everybody to a decent level. So I put together a program to do that. It evolved over the years, and now TEDx Ruakura didn't survive COVID. I now coach TEDx University of Waikato. And in the last 2 years of doing that, so that started 2024, and this year, last year, 2025 was our second year. In those 2 years, 20% of our speakers were awarded the editor's choice by TED. So they were chosen by TED to have a profile done on them and stuff like that. And I only mention that because I say that our program does get people to a world-class level in speaking, and that TED editor's choice is only given 6% internationally. So we've been hitting over 3 times the global average in terms of that in the last 2 years. So very proud of that. So that's where I'm coming from. That's what my experience is. And yeah, now
Hey.
I think that covers everything.
Yeah, I think that's very helpful so people get more of a understanding of your backstory and what you've done. And now we're going to jump into turning your book into a speech. I know that you mentioned to me that you've helped people get their book, help them get their book out in a way of speaking on the stages about it. Can you tell us a little more about that?
Yeah, yeah. So I want to preface anything I say here with my philosophy on coaching is very much that there is no one right way to do anything. Yeah. I have a whole rant about gurus and how they say there's only one way to do it. It's not true. And particularly with something like speaking, because we all have different strengths and weaknesses. And I guess this comes back from my martial arts days, teaching people to fight in tournaments. You cannot tell the big guy and the small guy the same way of fighting. Like, it's just not going to work for them, right? So, and it's the same with speaking. So when I suggest something here, take what works and leave what doesn't, because it's what works for you, not what works for everybody. So I just wanted to start off with that caveat. In terms of what you do speaking about your book, the number one mistake I see people make is they are unclear on what their goal is before they speak. And you have to be really, really clear. Why am I giving this talk? Now, one of the reasons I say that is you find a lot of people, particularly if they have a non-fiction book, will be turned into educators, and they want to educate the person um, the same as the book does. But that's the job of the book. That's not the job of you speaking. Usually, the job of you speaking is to get them to buy a book. So it's a different job. You don't want to do the same job as the book. You don't want to speak and do the education. That's the book's job. Your job is to, in my opinion, your job is to speak and get them intrigued about the possibilities of that book, get them curious about what that book can do for them, and then let the book do the job of education. So that would be my number one mistake that I see people make. So stepping back from that, so how do we make that happen? I think one of the best models of this would be Simon Sinek's talk. He did a I think it was TEDx Puget Sound actually, talk on your reason why, or something about why. I forget the name of it now. And what that was he'd just finished writing a book, and that one concept, this reason why, was one chapter of his book, as I understand it. So he just went, I'm just going to show them that one concept and explain that one concept. And so he went through that concept. The reason, and that might sound like education, but there's more to it than just that. And the reason that works is I see a TEDx style talk. So when I talk about a TEDx talk, I'm not saying that you need to necessarily do a TEDx talk, but I think you should do a TEDx style talk, because TEDx is not the best stage for every business or every book or every whatever you're doing, right? Every project. It is good if you can get on there, but it's not ideal for everybody. But the style, we can learn something from the style. So a TEDx style talk to me is, I often describe it as the on-ramp to my obsession. So if I'm the speaker, the talk that I'm going to give is the on-ramp for you to join me in my obsession. My obsession is whatever my topic is, right? Because what we want to do is we want to dial up their curiosity, wind up their wonder, and get them thinking, wow, I didn't know that was possible. I want to know more. And the way we do that is we take our topic. If the natural tendency is to try and cover everything, but if you go really broad, you end up being very shallow. And that's not meaningful, or it doesn't really get the depth that people want. It's broad and shallow is just not that interesting to us. What we want to do is go narrow and deep. We're going to find one thing, one aspect, like Simon picked on one chapter or one concept, and go really deep into that concept. By doing that, we're acknowledging along the way that there's all this other stuff we can't cover, because we don't have time to cover that. We've only got 15 minutes in a TEDx talk generally. So we haven't got time for all of that. We're just going to go deep on this. And that's much more satisfying in terms of, I really feel I get that as an audience person, but I also know there's way more than this one thing that we've gone deep on. So that is what I try to work with my speakers on.
Great. So when you do this, what is it that you feel are the top targets or the top points to have within your speech when you're talking about your book, or you're referencing it, or you're trying to get them interested in it? I know that you said piquing their curiosity and pulling them in that way, but are there certain topics or certain points that you're like, oh, this is always good to use this kind of way of looking at it, or something like this?
Um, it's hard to give a generic answer because every talk and topic is different, right? Every book's different. But I will say this: do not underestimate the stories aspect. You have to tell stories, right? So a lot of times people will stick to the abstract and talk about the concept in an abstract way, and it's not engaging. It's just not engaging with people. So the best way to introduce and give depth to a concept is to tell a story where that concept applies. And so you tell a story about that time when this thing happened, or and it could be a personal story about something that happened to you. It could be a story of a client. It could be a historic story and apply the concept to show how or why that worked out the way it did, right? So stories are what really engage people. And when I'm coaching our speakers, so we have a process, and we start off with clarity, which is what I said earlier, knowing why you're doing this, knowing what the talk's about, what you're trying to get out of it, and then what the audience needs to get out of it. Then we go to structure and how we're going to structure it. And when we go through structure, one of the main things I do is I work out the audience journey. So one of the first things we do in clarity, actually, which I'll give you to write down because it's worth it, it'll help you do this thing properly, is I do an exercise called the audience promise. And we say, right, just imagine you've given your talk. I know you don't know what your talk is yet, but you've given your talk, you got a standing ovation. You know what you're talking about. When you've just finished, standing ovation, everybody's happy, they're getting up to go to a break, and you grab one of the audience members and you ask them 3 questions. First question you ask them is, what do you know now that you didn't know before I started this talk? All right. And you get them to write that down. I get my speakers to write that down. That's what you want your audience to know at the end of the talk they didn't know beforehand. The next question we ask them is, how did you feel at the end of the talk? And you write down what you want them to feel at the end of the talk. And be very specific about it, not feel good. That's not a good thing, right? I want them to feel inspired. I want them to feel empowered. I want them to feel relieved. I don't know what it is, but be very specific about the feeling you want them to have at the end of the talk. And the third thing is, what action will you take now that you, as a result of this talk, that you wouldn't have previously taken? Now, the action one can be a little bit different because it depends on the topic. Instead of an action, it could be a perspective. It might be, next time I'm in this situation, I'll look at it this way, not that way, type thing. Or it could be, actually, I will take this action and not that action. It depends on the talk. So there should be a change in action or perspective. And we do that early on, like literally day one, because as we go through the writing process, that's our focus. That's our guiding light as we go through. There's this audience promise. As we look back and we go, right, I could tell this story, I could tell this story. Which one's going to hit the audience promise better? Is it going to teach them something so they know something they didn't know? Is it going to make them feel that way? Is it going to get them to take that action? If it's 2 out of 3, it goes in. If it's 1 out of 3, it might not go in. If it's 3 out of 3, it's definitely in. If it doesn't hit any of them, you don't need to put it in at all, right? So that really helps with doing that. And so once we've got that, we then work on the structure. And the structure is, we have a logical journey and an emotional journey. And this is where a lot of people have their first struggle, I think, is as human beings, like if we've got a continuum from logic to emotion, we're somewhere on there. All of us are somewhere on there, right? And so most of us, I would imagine, are more nearer the middle, because the mean bell curve, right? So we're nearer the middle, but all of us will feel more comfortable with the emotion or more comfortable with the logic. So we tend to lean on the area we're more comfortable with. The key is that you need to have both. People don't make decisions without emotion. Emotion is what activates their decision making. So if you have all logic and no emotion, people will listen to it, they'll say that makes sense, and they'll walk away. without making a decision, because there is no emotion. On the other hand, if it's all emotion and there's no logic, people will feel great. And again, they'll go away because they've got nothing to justify a decision. They don't know what they're supposed to be doing with it anyway, right? So you have to have both. So the way we do that is we work on a logical journey, have a very specific methodology for working out a logical journey using the stories that you already have and you know. And then we overlay that with an emotional map. And because emotion, key thing, emotion works in contrast. So if I'm doing a rah-rah talk and I'm rah-rah all the way and it's flat because I'm the same the whole way through, you get no emotional benefit from that. To get the benefit of that, and that's why you see motivational speakers like Tony Robbins will tell you the sad, horrible story of washing his dishes in the bathtub or whatever it is, and then it'll lead up to the eventual triumph, and it's that contrast from sad or depressed to happy or whatever that makes the emotional connection. So we have to work out how our story is going to evolve over the time of that talk to hit a sort of a little bit of a high point, a yay, and then a lower point, an uh-oh, and then another yay or something, and then down to pit of despair and end up on your triumph or your empowerment or whatever it is you want to end on. So there you go.
Thank you. And you just reminded me again how how I teach writing a book is so similar to how you teach speaking, because the emotion is so vital and so important. But I wanted you to talk to everyone and let them know the importance of using the stage
Okay.
and why it's beneficial. And yeah.
Okay. So yeah, so I should realize you guys know story anyway, so you know how to do these story structure points. The next thing is performance, I guess, is that's the fourth thing we focus on. And performance is using the stage, but also using your voice. So I don't know how I would do this in writing, so I'm going to be asking these questions later of Dani. I know how to do it in voice. And there are times when things feel heavy and you slow down and you lower your voice and you lean forward and you get people when that part of the story is like that. And then there's a time where it gets exciting and you raise your voice and you speak faster and you gesticulate a little bit more and you're a little bit more amped up, right? And you have to have those different personas in your stage vocabulary, if you like, to get that point across. So that's part of that emotional thing. But this is the performance aspect. On the stage, one of the rules that I have, and again, rules can be broken, but you should know they're a rule before you break them, if you know what I mean. One of the rules is you stand still when you're delivering a talk. So you stand and deliver. You don't pace as you're talking. Now, I grew up pacing. I think when I'm walking. So I used to drive my mum mad. If I had a problem with a maths problem when I was doing my homework, I'd walk around and around the coffee table in the lounge thinking, because that's how I think, and it would drive my mad. So I'm used to pacing. So this took me a while to get right. But you should never walk on stage, walk back and forth talking. You should ideally stand in one spot and talk. And then if you want to move, you stop talking, you move to another position, and then when you're rooted in one position, then you start talking again. I've read some psychology paper a while back, so I can't even remember where it was, on this, and they said we don't trust people who are walking while they're talking. I don't know how true that is. Intuitively, I'm like, makes sense to me, so I've just kept with it. But I have seen the difference it makes when people actually stand still to talk and deliver. But you can use movement, and you should use movement on the stage to delineate things. So at the end of a page or a chapter, you're moving over to the next topic or concept. That's when I'd do it. I'd stop talking, I'd move a couple of paces, and then I'd start on the next topic or concept. And it's like turning the page mentally for the audience. I'm like, right, okay, that's what we're doing. The other way we've used stage movement before is if we're doing a talk and we're talking about the past and the future all the time, or let's say the past and then the future here, we talk about the past, we move over here, and we're talking about that. And then when we talk to the future, we move over here and we talk about that. And you only have to sort of describe that once, and then the audience will know when you move, you're talking about the past or the future, or they'll know that you're talking about this perspective or that perspective or whatever it is. And that can be very effective, and it makes it a lot easier to understand, sometimes in quite complex talks. So we've had very academic, scientific talks, and using the stage in that way creatively can really make a difference. You just need to think about this well in advance, and that's part of the writing process. So that's how we use the stage. Also in performance, I include talking about slides. Now, slides, generally speaking, I recommend people don't use slides with my TEDx speakers. I'll say, ideally, you're not going to use a slide. That's just blanket. Ideally, you're not going to use a slide. It's just one more level of complexity that you need to address, right? So if you can do without that complexity, all the better. However, there are really good uses for slides. So slides are really good. Images are great for dialing the emotion in. You know, we want a happy image, or we want a sad image, or whatever, a shocking image, that sort of thing. It's good for dialing in the emotion. Sometimes graphs or diagrams are really important with abstract concepts when we're talking about scientific stuff or whatever, which is you just can't verbally describe it. They need to see something. So you absolutely need them for that. We once had the guy that developed the Manta 5 hydro bike. So this is a bike that you cycle on water. You can cycle across the lake and stuff like that. He was just launching it. It was the prototypes had been built. He's just going into production. Most people had never seen it. So we had to put the video of that bike a couple of times in the talk because they didn't have anything to imagine it by. So we showed somebody cycling across the lake, and he had to, one of the parts of the talk was how many pedal pumps would it take to get from being submerged to getting up onto the top of the water. So we had to show that in video because it was a hard thing to describe if you've never seen it. So using visuals is important in that way, but you should know when you use them. But more importantly, I think, is when you should turn them off. So if you have a critical point, you get to that impact point, the big point that you want to make, that big, statement that's going to pull all this stuff together, you don't want people looking at the slide. You want people looking at you, because ultimately this is about branding yourself. So what I always do is we have black slides within the presentation. So you click onto it and it'll just screen will go black. Because what happens is everybody's looking at the slide, because that's what we all do in the audience, and then it'll go black and everybody will look to you. And then you pause a second and you deliver your main line and they remember you. This is just as important, I believe, on doing these sorts of things in a virtual presentation. You click off the slide so you're there when you're delivering some of the key pieces of information.
Woohoo! Nice. Well, I feel like that was a heck of a lot of info that can be very valuable. And I think I want to see if anybody has any questions for you.
Yeah, I do. So, I recognize the value of standing on stage and presenting. I would have to mentally translate a few things I used to teach, and they wanted you to actually move. So yeah, so I can see that visually. But then could you take this content that you've prepared, but then translate it into like an interview or a podcast or some sort of presentation that isn't just a delivery?
Yes. So the way I work with the speakers that I work with TEDx, they know basically a 15-minute talk. That's our target time, maximum of 15 minutes. And they know that off by heart, and it's in my technical term for it is in chunks. It's in chunks. They know these chunks, right? And so often what you'll find is that somebody will come up with a question and you'll answer with that chunk, because you already know it by that stage. And so you're using these in your answers to an interview, podcast, that sort of thing. You'll use these sorts of chunks. In fact, we had Pamela, who was chair of the board of Kaivolution, which is a local non-profit. It is a food rescue service, and that's quite a different thing. Like, people don't know what a food rescue service is, and I'm not going to go into it now, but she used to go for these funding events, networking events, to try and talk to funders, and it would drain her because she'd spend the whole day there. She'd only talk to 4 to 6 people, and she'd spend all of it explaining what she did, and she'd leave drained and not anywhere further along. Her board nominated her to do this TEDx talk. It wasn't her idea. She'd never really done public speaking, but she's like, okay. She did work. She did really well. She delivered a fantastic talk. And a couple of weeks later, she was asked to a networking event, and she goes, hey, I've just done a TEDx talk. Would you like me to deliver that to your event? And I said, sure, that sounds great. So she did that. And it revolutionized everything she did from that day forward, because she came up, she gave the talk. When she went down to mingle for the networking, everybody knew what she did. And they came over with just, hey, I love what you're doing. We've got a van that's free 2 days a week. Would that be useful to you to use that van for these 2 days a week, or whatever it was? And it got to the point where after that, she never went to another networking event unless she could speak. But she'd say, I can do a 2-minute, 5-minute, 10-minute, or the 15-minute, whatever works for you guys. And she'd just cut that in. So I know that's not exactly what you asked, but it's the same concept, because she could just use pieces of a talk, either to answer questions or to otherwise get that message across. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you. Anyone else with any questions? No, you guys are good? So shall we switch it now?
Let's
Chris?
switch it. Woohoo. Okay, so you got to introduce yourself and
Okay.
how
Everyone knows
you
me here.
got into what you're doing. These guys do, but
Yes.
yeah.
All right. Hello, everyone. Dani here, and I will tell you a little bit about my passion. So, as a little girl, about 5 years old, I learned how to hook a camcorder to my TV. So I started creating these videos, and I loved it. And so when I turned about 11 or 12, for a birthday present, I had all my friends get ready for a serial killer movie. And so they got to be a part of this serial killer movie we made that was so cheesy, ridiculously cheesy. And after a couple hours, my friends looked at me. When is this over? Can we do something else? And I didn't believe it. I was so shocked that they didn't have the passion that I had for this. And so I learned how to translate that into writing. And so I started writing these stories because I didn't have to rely on having a whole team to create the story I wanted. I could just create it from my mind and put it on a piece of paper. And so, this is where it really stems from. So that's my intro.
Okay. So I'm going to look at this from the point of view of somebody who has done a talk, but they've never written a book about what they've just talked about. because I know a lot of those people, to be honest. And so, what is the difference, do you think, between what I would say in a talk and and let's say I talk a lot about speaking. So let's use me as an example. What would I do different in terms of writing a book about speaking?
So, the huge difference between writing a book versus speaking is when you're speaking, you're using your body. You're using what people can visually see. When you're writing on a piece of paper, you're writing something that people can imagine. And that does not mean it's going to be the same exact something that the author actually sees. And so when you're creating characters, for instance, in a book, you're going to want to describe how they look. You maybe give them little tweaks or quirks where maybe they shake a lot, or it could be maybe they have a cigarette out of their lip all the time, or just something like this that makes you go, oh, yes, this person. It also helps you get a feel of how this person holds themselves. If they stand up straight and they're wearing a suit all the time and they have a serious face, you're probably going to see, oh, I don't know if I'd get along with that guy. He's probably not so fun to joke around with if I tried. Um, but yeah, so like in that instant, in that way, you have to remember that you're painting the picture with your words on a piece of paper versus if you're on a stage, you have only your own self to explain it. I mean, you could describe it to a person, but it's still completely different. You use different words when you're talking versus on a piece of paper or in a book.
Perfect. No, that's cool. That's cool.
Mhm.
And what is the biggest mistake that a new writer tends to make? What do you find most when somebody's new to writing and they come to you and go, I've got my first manuscript and it's this. What's the first thing you go, uh-oh, we need to work on that?
So, you know how you mentioned that, what was it? You said logic and emotion.
Yeah.
So, what I say when it comes to writing a book, we have the brain and we have the heart. And you need both, just like you had mentioned too. And I've read some people's works that they just use the brain. So it's very much data oriented and it's makes you want to go, oh man, is this over?
Yeah.
And then there's the people that write from their heart and it's beautiful, but then it kind of gets jumbled and you're like, wait, what's actually happening? It just feels like some pieces start to get missing. And so
Right.
it's also when you're writing, you have to remember you're using the left side and the right side of the brain to create the completion of a book. So this doesn't mean that not everyone can write using both simultaneously or like right after another because it's hard to do. But it's good to have times where you take to just get yourself in the flow to do some of the process and then analyze it, look back, oh wait, I need to actually have some more data to reflect back on this. So that's quite helpful doing it in that sense. I kind of forgot your question now.
No, biggest mistakes was the question.
Yes. Oh, yes. And I was thinking of another one I was going to say. When it comes to speaking, because I've worked with some people that they speak their document first and then they show it to me in that sense, which it's great, but it's like you make it like a conversation and that can work, but you also have to remember what kind of book are you writing? What, like you had said as well, what are the emotions you want your audience to feel from reading this? What do you want them, the outcome to be for them at the end? Do you want them to take an action, like you had mentioned as well? These are very similar to this speaking on a stage, but when you are doing a conversation throughout your whole book, you need to have it set up in a way that people understand what they're getting themselves into. And this isn't a normal kind of way of writing because you want to give them that connection, that emotion that they feel, oh, this is, I relate with this person, or oh, I went through an experience just like that. And a way to do that is not really from a conversation. It's more bringing them to the place to feel the emotions, to be in the experience. And so when it comes to on a stage, you can't really do it that same way. I mean, I've seen some performances where they've brought it out to life, but it's not the same because when you write a book, you get to help someone create their own world, or you get to help them create their own character of what you give them to work with. So I've met some people that have read the same book, but the image that they have for a character is completely different.
Yeah.
And so then they make this series or this book into a movie, and then people are like, oh, I hate this character. He looks nothing like how he's supposed to.
Tom
And you're
Cruise
like,
being Jack Reacher, for example. Yeah.
yeah. And then so many people are just heartbroken or are bashing on it, or some are just fully in love with the character. But yeah, everyone's mind, what they see in their mind is going to be completely different. So I love that.
That is cool. So it sounds to me, and I might be wrong, so that's why I want to clarify this. It sounds to me that as you're writing a book, you're writing in different styles throughout the book. So you might be much more of a conversational thing, and then you've got to have the more, for want of a better word, logical piece, or you've got different pieces, and it's not the same style all the way through. There's some changes in there. Is that right? Am I getting that right?
Yes. So it's similar to how you're talking about the voice going up and down.
Yeah.
So it's similar in a book. For instance, let's say you read a book out there that just stays bland the whole way, like just data. You're probably going to be like, oh my gosh, it's usually those books that we have for school. Science books or math books, those are going to be a little more just data oriented.
Yeah.
Let's say that there's another book out there that's all about action pack. Like you're just reading violence, violence, violence. Oh, person died here, there. You're going to just be like, your heart's going to be racing the whole time and be like, oh, I need a breather. I need a break. Oh my gosh, this is so
Yeah.
much. And that's why I really like one of these books that I've read that reflects on this, and they explained how it's content, being a content writer, image writer, and what was it? An action writer. And so the content writer is the one that's giving you more of the data. Then there's the image writer. This is the person that's giving you the descriptions, the emotions. And then there's the action when it's taking you on that roller coaster up and down of like, oh, go, go, go. Things are happening all the time. And then it gets sprinkled on. Another way that someone has said this is you need to have a little bit of that. If, okay, for instance, let's think about going on a road trip in Midwest, like South Dakota, where I'm from. You're driving along for 4 hours. You can see the horizon, nothing else. It's flat, nothing's going on. And so this is vital to have in a book. Having moments where you have it just like going straight. You can see what's happening. You can reflect. You can just rest and be like, oh. And in a book, this is when the character is reflecting on something. They're taking in that intense scene that just happened, or they're taking on that violence that just had happened, and they're just going, oh my gosh, now I see what I need to do with my life. Oh, that man's a horrible man. I have to let him go. Whatever it is, but it's so important to have these times that the reader can breathe. So that's why it's important to have all these different points of the writing.
That's cool. I like that so much because that's one of the key things, and one of the hardest things to get speakers to do is pause and use silence in their talk. And you have to, when you drop that key piece of information that brings things together, you've got to stop and let people digest that information. And if a 2 second pause on stage feels like an eternity, and too many people will try and fill that with words, and they're robbing their audience of getting the benefit of what they've just shared, because people need to process it. And so I love that. It's exactly the same sort of thing. Slightly different, but same. Yeah. Oh, cool. I like that. All right. So what do you find is the thing that people come to you the most? Like, they recognize that this is a problem and they go, I don't know how to do this thing, or I know it feels wrong here, but I'm not quite sure why. What's the most common thing that people come to you where they either misunderstand it, or they sort of see the problem, but they don't know why they've got that problem?
Yeah, so usually people think it's a different problem, and then we talk and discuss it, and we figure out it's usually clarity problem or a direction problem, which is the same. And you're like, oh yeah, that I know that. And so this just means like that's why I've created the story first method, because this is vital to do even before the writing process. I've met so many people that are just like, isn't writing a book just writing? I'm like, no. There's so much more. You have to understand what you want the reader to get out of it. So, what are the feelings you want them to have? What journey do you want to take them on? What kind of people, like, who's your ideal reader? And it's vital to know these things even before you do the writing process, because you need to understand where you want it to end before you begin.
Yeah, yeah, and yeah, we're on the same page with that um,
Mm.
clarity piece. I had said that we've got these four pillars that I work through, which is clarity, structure, flow, and then performance. But I've also put them as like a pyramid before. You've got clarity, and then structure, and then flow, and then performance. The point being that each one rests on the one before it. And so your structure is only going to be as good as your clarity, and your flow is only going to be good as your structure, and your performance is only going to be as good as your flow. And so if you don't get each one of them nailed down before you work on the other, you're limiting how you are going to be. And so many speakers go straight to performance because that's what they think they need. And it's like, yeah, if you're working on that and you have never looked at your clarity, you're building on soft ground. It's just all gonna fall apart, basically.
Yeah,
So yeah.
yeah. That's what I say about the having the story, like understanding the clarity, the direction is the foundation to your book, the spine of the book. And then when you don't have that, you're gonna have a floppy book that has some problems. And
Perfect.
I've also seen and met some people that, and worked with people too, where they get stuck halfway through their book, and we call that, many of us, the messy middle. And it brings a lot of writers to a halt and not even get the book out there. And it usually stems from not having that direction. So they end up rewriting over and over. They end up self doubting, thinking that their story is a pile of crap or something. And they come to me, and then we focus on what they actually want the story to do for them. Then a lot of things start changing. Then they understand more of what they want the underlying messages to be, the theme, what kind of genre it is. Because sometimes you may feel like you're writing in this kind of genre, and then you realize that's actually not the kind of story that you want to get out. You want to get it out in a different perspective, in a way.
Mm.
That makes sense.
Yeah, no, that does. Okay, I've got a selfish question here. And maybe you can answer it. Maybe you don't have an answer for this. So I feel very comfortable writing a non-fiction style book because I've been working in that education space for a long time, creating training manuals and things like that. But if I was to move to writing fiction, now I have read fiction all my life. I'm a huge science fiction, fantasy nerd, all that sort of thing. If I wanted to write fiction, I don't know that I could do that. So what tips do you have for somebody wanting to move either from the fiction to the non-fiction or from non-fiction to fiction? What's the difference, and what do they have to be aware of, somebody wanting to do that?
I think someone needs to be aware that if they want to do it, they can do it. It just means that it might be a learning curve, that they have to be aware that the way that they look at writing may not fit the way that they want to write this particular book. For instance, there's a lot of authors out there that have written for different kinds of genres, and each genre they may write it a little bit differently depending on the genre. So, for instance, if we're looking at a nonfiction, that is going to be written a lot differently compared to a fantasy, because this is going to be something that is true, probably a memoir or something that personally happened to you. So it's going to, the whole process of creating it is going to feel a lot differently than to you as well. So compared to a fantasy, which you still sprinkle pieces of yourself in a fantasy, it's just that you kind of sugarcoat it or cover it up with a whole fantasy world you create and all these different characters and elves and whatever it is. So you still have some of those vital points. The underlying message in both of these stories could be the same. It's just the way you give it to your audience. And it also depends on your ideal reader, who you're wanting to, and then also what you want it to do for you. So, like, for instance, if you want it to get you on stage, then you probably want to think, what kind of book am I thinking of for a stage? What kind of people am I wanting to attract? And these parts help you understand more of where you want the book to go. But yeah.
Cool. Okay. So do we have any questions from anybody else? I can still come up with another one if nobody else has got any questions, but I figured I should let everybody else have a chance.
Well, I would say in terms of your question, Chris, earlier to Danny, in terms of difference between speaking and writing, is the whole one is real life, the other one you can take as long as you need to craft the story. And then also the reader has their own speed, right? They can take a book, they can read a page, they can toss it into the corner, they can pick it up again, or they can binge read the whole night and put it down in the morning and say, you know, I'm finished, and what an exciting journey. And that synchronicity isn't, so that synchronicity is there in speaking, it isn't there in writing and reading.
Yeah,
I think that's a big difference in terms of also word works structurally and what you need to bring onto a stage or into a story for that to transmit successfully.
That's a
Yes.
really good point, because we have a concept that I teach called I call it a speed bump, and it's basically exactly that, synchronicity or asynchronous stuff. So if you're reading something and something doesn't quite make sense, you just go back and reread that sentence a couple of times. We've all done that. When you're speaking, if you have something in there that doesn't quite make sense, it's like a car going along a road, hitting the bump, and you're off in the air for a second, because the person goes, oh, what does that acronym mean? I wonder what that means. And then by the time they've sort of either figured it out or decided they can't figure it out, they've missed a bit. They've skipped a bit, like a skipping record or whatever. And if you do that once or twice in a talk, you're probably okay. But if you do that too many times in a talk, they've missed half of your talk. So that can be a very simple thing, and often it's cultural. Sometimes it'll be industry specific language or jargon. For example, we had a TEDx speaker. She was talking, Linda. She was talking on health and safety. She was talking about health and safety, and one of the lines in her talk was, "After Pike River, everything changed." Now, this was at rehearsal. And everybody in that room knew what she meant. And in the event, everybody in that room would have known what she meant in New Zealand here. But knowing that this was going to be on the TED platform globally, it's like it's a speed bump. Everybody's going to go after Pike River. What the hell does that mean? And they're going to skip a piece. So all we had to do there was put in a couple of extra words. After the Pike River mining disaster, everything changed. And that was enough to give everybody context of what that meant. And they go, oh, it's mining disaster. They don't have to spend any more time on it. If they hadn't heard of it before, they could look it up if they wanted to, but it kept the context there. So yeah, that's an example of a speed bump, but very good, Wolfram. I like that. That is a key difference between the two. Very good. Yeah. Cool. Any other comments, questions, anything you feel like you got out of doing this, or?
I can say it was very. Sorry,
Oh.
sorry. Carry on, Nikki. Sorry.
Okay, thank you. I really enjoyed the way that you put your questions to Chris, and the way that you sort of bounce off each other. I loved the analogy part of, Dani, when you were talking about like when you're writing about things and taking like the practicing like a pause, and Chris, you mentioned a pause. And my book that I've just written, I actually, through every single chapter, I say to the reader, let's pause. And I give them a little integration, sort of somatic practice, a little bit of a breath, just to pause, and then they come back to the rest of the chapter when they're ready. So I liked how you said that, Chris, on the stage, that you pause, don't rush, give it even if it's 2 seconds seems like quite a long time. And then the way that you said it, Dani, about just like pausing through the book, getting the reader to just sit there and just think about what they've just read. So I've got lots of stuff written down here, so thank you. It's been really insightful. Thank you.
Thanks, Nikki.
I'm glad.
Wolfram, what were you?
Just wanted to echo that I also found this really helpful. I mean, I've spent the last 6 months teaching at my old university for the first time after a 3-decade career in business, and that was very rewarding. And I've also, together with Dani, participated in an online speaking competition. So, and that was also interesting because it shows you how little 7 minutes can feel like, but also how vast they can feel like.
Yeah.
And as you said, it's so tempting to bring all the topics to the campfire, but then you remain shallow and people just get disoriented. Or if you give them a really brief hook and then you narrow in and focus in on the topic, then 7 minutes is actually quite a long stretch of time. But if you're trying to cover too much ground, so I totally resonate with the idea of focusing on a specific topic rather than trying to cover too much.
Yeah. Cool. Excellent. And Melissa, how did you find this?
Really enlightening aspects that I hadn't considered, that I'll definitely be implementing for sure, for both my writing and the uncomfortable element of speaking.
Cool. All right. Well, and I'm pleased that we got to get this. So this morning, I got up. This is early morning here. It's now it's nearly 8 o'clock in the morning here. But I got up and my internet was not working, so I was tragically going around trying to reboot routers and and the computer and everything. So I was a bit flustered this morning. So I'm glad everything ended up working right, because I didn't feel like it was working right when I jumped on here, to be honest. But we got it. We got there in the end. Did you want to add anything, Dani, before we wrap up?
Yeah, I wanted to add, we're going to be doing a workshop August 6th, and it's called, oh my gosh, turn your story into authority. Oh, my bad. It's a long night for me, I guess. But this is where we dive into helping people understand the benefit of using storytelling. And so he takes the speaking side of it, and then the writing book side is mine. So we're going to be doing that. Here, I'll send the link in the comments so you guys have it. Otherwise, I'll be sharing it in posts until the day.
Yeah. Vasi, did you want to jump in and say anything? Did you get all of that?
Yeah, I thought it was really interesting, and yeah, I appreciate both of you sharing your perspectives. I guess I was surprised to hear you say don't walk during your talk. I hadn't heard that before.
Yeah.
I guess the reason is that people can get distracted if you're walking and talking. So yeah, I'll definitely play with that because I've only done 2 talks on a stage so far, and I definitely walked during one of them, and then the second one I fiddled with the microphone like the whole time. So yeah, I need to work on my stage presence, but it wasn't quite high enough, so I kept like trying to get it up to my mouth so people could hear me. So yeah, I probably could have taken it off the stand and done that, but you know, live and learn.
Yeah, and that's a good point. We had one speaker a couple of years ago who I've forgotten his name. I can see his face, can't remember his name. He would sway back and forth. He was quite tall and he kept his feet quite close together. So I just said, put your feet further apart, and it felt a bit odd to him, but it didn't look odd because he was tall. It looked normal, and that was enough. That stopped him swaying. And then we had one other person who nervously would move around quite a bit. And this was not my idea. This was his idea. He told me afterwards. So I'm not saying that this is a good idea, but this worked for him. He practiced, he put a plank of wood on a couple of bricks and did all his talk when he practiced his talk standing on the plank. So he couldn't move. And he was great on the stage on the day. So it all comes down to that practice. You want to practice the way you want to deliver, and so that makes a difference. Cool.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Interesting.
Yes,
Do you have any tips? I had one more question. Oh, but I can do that after you.
No,
Go ahead,
go
Wolfram.
No, no,
first.
go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. Any tips for applying for TEDx talks?
Yes, I'll give you a couple.
Okay.
First of all, don't tell them you're a coach if you're a coach. That's the
Okay.
first red flag that everybody TEDx selectors will use. They'll just cut, oh, that's a coach, don't worry. And that's because a lot of coaches have already burned bridges. They just self-promote, and it's not a self-promotion stage. So, and typically, like, we used to have 250 applicants for 10 speaker slots. So the first thing you're trying to do is just have an excuse to cut people so you can manage the list a little bit more. So don't tell them you're a coach. That's the first thing. Second thing, there's 3 questions that subconsciously they want answered. They might not tell you this. We were explicit in the stage 2 of our selection, but that is, what are you talking about? Why is that important right now? Like, why? If it's still important in a year's time, we'll do it next year. Why is it important to talk about that now? And why are you the person to be talking about this? You must answer those questions in your application, even though they don't expressly say those things, because you will get people saying, I've read this book. It's such a good book. It's changed my life. I want to talk about it. No, dude, we want the author of the book to talk about it, not you, because you read it, So you've got to have a reason. Now, it might be you read this book and you had an experience that was like that. And because of my experience, I want to talk about it because of this experience I had. That's fine. That's valid. And that probably is the other thing, is that when you're talking about anything, and I don't know how this translates to writing, but anyway, when you're talking about something that you've experienced, they can't sort of say that's not true because you experienced it, right? So when you're talking from that frame, you've got some level of authority, and that's something we'll be talking about in our workshop, obviously. But answers your question, Vasi.
Thank you. Yeah, and my book would be based, my talk would be based on my book or from material from the book. So
yeah, that'll be cool. Yeah, and do what do you call it? Research TEDx around you. They have the same rules, but every TEDx is independently run, so they don't have the same, let's say, quality. Not many offer a bunch of coaching. Like we offer a full coaching program, 12-week coaching program for our speakers. In fact, mandatory. They've got to go through it, right?
Wow.
Most don't
And
get
which
that.
TEDx do you run?
TEDx University of Waikato, and I don't get to run it. So I don't the selection now. I used to select for TEDx Ruakura, but the university selects, so I don't I don't get
Got
to
it.
select the talks. Um,
Wow.
and so, but do check them out and check out how good their videos are. When I did TEDx Ruakura, our videos were not flash. Our focus was on the live event, and the videos were like an extra. Whereas TEDx University of Waikato, the videos are fantastic. They don't spare any expense because they know the importance of that, and that's their point, is to get it out into the world. So check previous speakers of that talk, to look at the videos of that TEDx before you sign up, so you know what you're signing up for. Like, make sure they're good enough to have you, not that you're just good enough to get on there, if you know what I mean. Yeah.
Mm. Okay. Thank you so much, both of you. Great talk.
No worries. Anything else, or shall we wrap that up? What are we time-wise? Oh, yeah, we've done the hour.
4 minutes past the hour.
Yeah. Okay, well, thanks very much for coming along, folks. Really good. Danny's shared the link, and yeah, we'll catch up with.
I do think Wolfram had a question. I'm sorry to interject, but Wolfram had a question and I kind of interrupted. So I just want to make sure you have a chance to ask.
It was more a slight rephrasing of your summary, Yazzie, in the sense that I don't think Chris said you shouldn't move at all. It's just more the intentionality of your movement. So if you're like Chris said, sort of running around the kitchen table working at a math problem, that is and I do that. That's the same for me when I'm deep in thought. I typically run around in circles. That is not very commensurate to the audience experience. But if you're deliberately taking a step towards the audience or retreating, so you're using that as a element of stage presence, then I don't think Chris, and I'm not. I'm summarizing. It probably shouldn't be.
No, you're absolutely right. Intentionality is a perfect word for it. Absolutely, because there are times where you want to lean forward, and on here I'd lean forward. On the stage I might step forward, because I'm getting that intimate moment with the audience, if you like, and then stepping back because, for whatever effect we're trying to create or emotion we're trying to create. No, that's perfectly put.
And I once said it, what I'm trying to, when I speak, what I'm trying to give the audience is a hospitable experience, in the sense that I'm trying to be coherent to what I'm telling them. So I'm trying to give them gestures that support what I'm saying, not contradict. And it just means that people that maybe are wired differently to me are able to pick up cues that I'm dropping in a format that wouldn't be my natural habitat, but I've just tried to also add that as a different on-ramp, if you like.
Yeah. I'm just putting in a link. Sorry, I was putting in a link to my school community, actually. If anybody's interested in that, that's what I do with the compelling communicators.
Thank you.
Cool.
Whoop, whoop. Cool. Well, thank you all for coming. Chris, do you have anything else to say? I think I've said what I wanted to.
No, that's great. Thanks for coming along, and yeah, we'll see you out and about.
Thanks, everyone.